The following is a HennessyHendo production. It includes excerpts and material from my vast collection of books and general knowledge. My collection spans many centuries and millennia. I upload as I have time, but the sheer volume is just so immense. It would do the people of the world good to listen to some actual classics or educate themselves on all manner of topics from fictional books to philosophy. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel.
Eugenics is a social and scientific movement that emerged in the late 19th century with the goal of improving the genetic quality of the human population. Rooted in the idea of applying selective breeding principles from agriculture to human beings, eugenics has had a controversial and often dark history, marked by abuses, unethical policies, and its eventual rejection by mainstream science and society. In 1903, German physician Wilhelm Schallmayer published a seminal work titled Vererbung und Auslese im Lebenslauf der Völker, Heredity and Selection in the Course of the Life of Nations. This publication is considered one of the foundational texts in the field of eugenics, particularly within the German context. Author background: Wilhelm Schallmayer, 1857 to 1919, was a pioneering figure in German eugenics. Trained as a physician, he was deeply influenced by the rapid advancements in genetics and evolutionary biology during his time. Schallmayer's work aimed to apply scientific principles to social policy, with the goal of improving the genetic health of populations. Content overview. In Vererbung und Auslese, Schallmayer explores the implications of heredity and natural selection on human societies. He argues that modern civilization, through medical advancements and social welfare, inadvertently allows individuals with hereditary weaknesses to survive and reproduce, potentially leading to the degeneration of the population's genetic quality. Key themes. 1. Impact of modern medicine. Schallmayer contends that while medical interventions save lives, they also enable the survival of individuals with genetic defects, which could be passed on to future generations. 2. Social welfare and natural selection. He discusses how social support systems might interfere with natural selection by supporting those who might not have survived without such aid, thereby affecting the genetic makeup of the population. 3. Call for eugenic measures. Schallmayer advocates for the implementation of eugenic policies to counteract these trends, suggesting measures such as selective breeding and sterilization to enhance the genetic quality of the populace. Influence and legacy. Schallmayer's work significantly influenced the eugenics movement in Germany and beyond. His ideas contributed to the development of policies aimed at controlling reproduction to improve genetic health, which later culminated in more extreme and unethical practices during the Nazi era. Critical reception. While Schallmayer's work was initially regarded as a scientific approach to social issues, it has since been critically examined for its ethical implications and the role it played in justifying human rights violations under the guise of genetic improvement. Vererbung und Auslese stands as a pivotal work in the history of eugenics, reflecting early 20th century attempts to merge genetics with social policy. Its legacy serves as a cautionary tale about the potential dangers of applying scientific theories to social engineering without ethical considerations. Origins of eugenics. 1. Term and concept. The term eugenics was coined in 1883 by Francis Galton, a British scientist and cousin of Charles Darwin. Galton defined eugenics as the science of improving the stock, advocating for interventions to encourage reproduction among individuals with desirable traits, positive eugenics, and discourage it among those with undesirable traits, negative eugenics. 2. Influence of Darwinism. Inspired by Darwin's theory of natural selection, Galton believed that human traits like intelligence, morality, and health were hereditary and could be improved through controlled reproduction. Early eugenicists combined evolutionary theory with ideas of social reform, seeking to address issues like poverty, crime, and disease. Development and spread. 1. Early supporters. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, eugenics gained support among scientists, intellectuals, and policymakers in Europe and North America. It was often presented as a progressive, humanitarian effort to alleviate societal problems. 2. Scientific basis. Eugenicists relied on emerging fields like genetics and heredity, but their understanding was often flawed and simplistic. Traits such as intelligence or criminality were assumed to be hereditary, often without scientific evidence. 3. Positive versus negative eugenics. Positive eugenics, encouraging fit individuals, for example, those perceived as healthy, intelligent, or moral, to reproduce through incentives like tax benefits or public recognition. Negative eugenics, discouraging reproduction among unfit individuals, for example, those with disabilities, mental illness, or criminal records, through sterilization, marriage restrictions, or segregation. Eugenics in the United States. 1. American eugenics movement. The eugenics movement gained significant traction in the U.S. during the early 20th century, with leaders like Charles Davenport and Harry Laughlin promoting eugenics research and policies. Institutions like the Eugenics Record Office, founded in 1910, collected data on families and individuals to identify those deemed fit or unfit. 2. Compulsory sterilization. Many states passed sterilization laws targeting people in asylums, prisons, and those deemed mentally ill or disabled. The landmark Supreme Court case Buck v. Bell, 1927, upheld the constitutionality of compulsory sterilization, with Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes famously stating, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." Overview of sterilization laws. First law passed. Indiana passed the first eugenics-based sterilization law in the world in 1907. Total number of states. By the mid-20th century, around 32 states had enacted sterilization laws. These laws were often enforced through legal mandates or recommendations by state boards, targeting individuals in institutions such as mental hospitals, prisons, and reform schools. Here are key states that enacted compulsory sterilization laws, along with details of their programs. 1. Indiana, 1907. First state to pass a sterilization law. Targeted individuals in state institutions considered insane or feeble-minded. Repealed in 1974. 2. California, 1909. Enacted one of the most aggressive sterilization programs. By the 1950s, California had sterilized more individuals than any other state, accounting for about 20,000 procedures. Targeted mental health patients, prisoners, and the disabled. 3. Virginia, 1924. Passed its sterilization law under the Racial Integrity Act. The Supreme Court case Buck v. Bell, 1927, upheld Virginia's sterilization law, legitimizing compulsory sterilization nationwide. Repealed in 1974. 4. North Carolina, 1929. Established one of the most active sterilization programs, targeting poor women, African Americans, and those deemed socially or mentally unfit. Continued sterilizations into the 1970s, even as other states slowed their programs. Apologized and provided reparations to survivors in 2013. 5. Washington, 1909. Among the first states to pass a sterilization law, targeting habitual criminals, the mentally ill, and the disabled. 6. Michigan, 1913. Passed a sterilization law, but its implementation was more limited compared to other states. 7. Oregon, 1917. Established the Oregon Board of Eugenics, which later became the Board of Social Protection. Sterilizations continued into the 1980s. 8. Wisconsin, 1913. Targeted the feeble-minded and individuals in state institutions. Implementation was less widespread compared to other states. 9. Alabama, 1919. Passed a sterilization law, but enforcement was sporadic and not as extensive as in states like California or Virginia. 10. Georgia, 1937. Passed a sterilization law relatively late compared to other states, focusing on mental health patients. Other states that enacted sterilization laws include Arizona, 1929, Connecticut, 1909, Idaho, 1925, Iowa, 1911, Kansas, 1913, Minnesota, 1925, Mississippi, 1928, Montana, 1923, Nebraska, 1915, Nevada, 1911, North Dakota, 1913, South Carolina, 1935. South Dakota, 1917. Utah, 1925. Vermont, 1931. This Supreme Court decision upheld the constitutionality of sterilization laws, allowing programs to continue across the U.S. The case has never been explicitly overturned. Decline of sterilization programs. By the 1960s and 1970s, growing awareness of human rights abuses and the civil rights movement led to widespread criticism and eventual repeal of most sterilization laws. Reparations. Some states, such as North Carolina, have formally apologized and offered reparations to sterilization victims. Others, like Virginia and California, have issued public acknowledgments. Impact of sterilization laws. An estimated 60,000 to 70,000 individuals were sterilized under state eugenics programs in the U.S. during the 20th century. These programs disproportionately targeted marginalized groups, including women, African Americans, indigenous peoples, poor or working-class individuals, immigrants. 3. Immigration and marriage laws. Eugenic ideas influenced restrictive immigration policies, such as the Immigration Act of 1924, which aimed to limit immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe. Some states implemented laws banning interracial marriage, anti-miscegenation laws, on eugenic grounds. Eugenics in Europe. 1. British eugenics. In Britain, eugenics was promoted by figures like Galton, Karl Pearson, and others who linked eugenic practices with public health and social policy. While eugenics gained some public support, it was never as institutionalized as in the US or Germany. 2. Eugenics in Scandinavia. Countries like Sweden, Norway, and Denmark implemented sterilization programs, which continued into the 1970s. These programs targeted marginalized groups, including the mentally ill, disabled, and ethnic minorities like the Sami. 3. Nazi Germany and eugenics. Under Adolf Hitler, eugenics reached its most extreme and horrific form, becoming a core component of Nazi ideology. Policies included forced sterilizations, marriage restrictions, and ultimately the genocide of millions of Jews, Romani people, disabled individuals, and others deemed racially inferior in the Holocaust. The Nazi regime's atrocities led to a widespread rejection of eugenics after World War II. Decline of eugenics. 1. Scientific criticism. Advances in genetics, particularly the understanding of complex traits and the role of environment, undermined the simplistic assumptions of early eugenics. Scientists increasingly recognize the ethical problems and scientific invalidity of many eugenic claims. 2. Moral and ethical backlash. The association of eugenics with Nazi atrocities prompted a re-evaluation of eugenic practices worldwide. Compulsory sterilization programs and other policies were gradually repealed or abandoned in most countries by the mid-20th century. 3. Human rights movement. Post-war human rights efforts, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, emphasized individual dignity and autonomy, directly opposing eugenic ideologies. Legacy and modern implications. 1. Bioethics. The eugenics movement led to the development of bioethics, emphasizing the ethical considerations in genetic research and medical practices. 2. Genetics and reproductive technology. Modern advancements in genetic engineering, prenatal testing, and assisted reproduction raise ethical questions reminiscent of eugenics, such as the potential for designer babies or genetic selection. 3. Social justice and reparations. Some governments have issued formal apologies or reparations to victims of eugenics policies, acknowledging the harm caused by forced sterilizations and discrimination. Controversial legacy. While the eugenics movement aimed to improve human health and society, its legacy is marred by unethical practices, scientific misconceptions, and widespread human rights violations. Today, it serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of pseudoscience, prejudice, and social engineering. The relationship between eugenics and Charles Darwin is complex and rooted in the historical context of 19th and early 20th century science and social thought. While Darwin himself did not advocate for eugenics, his theory of natural selection inspired others to develop eugenic ideas. Darwin's contributions, natural selection and evolution. 1. Natural selection. In his groundbreaking work, On the Origin of Species, 1859, Darwin proposed that species evolve over time through natural selection, where individuals with advantageous traits are more likely to survive and reproduce. 2. Variation and heredity. Darwin highlighted the importance of variation within populations and how traits can be passed down to offspring, forming the foundation of evolutionary theory. 3. Human evolution. In The Descent of Man, 1871, Darwin explored how humans evolved, emphasizing that natural selection and sexual selection shaped human traits. He acknowledged societal influences on reproduction but did not advocate for artificial intervention. Eugenics and its roots. 1. Francis Galton. Eugenics was developed by Darwin's cousin, Francis Galton, who was inspired by Darwin's work on heredity and variation. Galton coined the term eugenics in 1883, defining it as the science of improving human stock through controlled breeding. While Darwin described the natural processes of selection in nature, Galton sought to apply these ideas deliberately to human populations. 2. Key ideas of eugenics. Positive eugenics, encouraging fit individuals to reproduce. Negative eugenics, discouraging or preventing reproduction among those deemed unfit, for example, through sterilization, segregation, or marriage restrictions. 3. Misinterpretation of natural selection. Eugenicists often misunderstood or misapplied Darwin's ideas, equating natural selection with social or artificial selection, and ignoring the complexity of human society and evolution. Darwin's views on eugenics. 1. Opposition to social selection. In The Descent of Man, Darwin noted that human societies often protect their weaker members through compassion and moral behavior, which may run counter to the strict principles of natural selection. He expressed concern about unchecked reproduction but stopped short of endorsing eugenic practices, instead emphasizing the ethical and moral complexities of human society. 2. Cautions about intervention. Darwin was aware of the risks of human interference in natural processes. He recognized the potential dangers of judging fitness based on subjective or arbitrary standards. Eugenics and social Darwinism. 1. Social Darwinism. Social Darwinism, a term coined later, applied Darwinian concepts to social, political, and economic systems. Proponents like Herbert Spencer and William Graham Sumner argued that competition and survival of the fittest justified social inequality, capitalism, and imperialism. While Darwin himself never endorsed social Darwinism, his ideas were co-opted by those advocating for hierarchical views of society. 2. Eugenics as an application of social Darwinism. Eugenicists adopted social Darwinist principles to justify interventions aimed at improving the human race, often targeting marginalized groups based on race, class, or disability. Key distinctions between Darwin and eugenics. 1. Natural versus artificial selection. Darwin described natural selection as a process occurring without human intervention, while eugenics involves deliberate human control over reproduction. 2. Ethical considerations. Darwin acknowledged the moral complexities of human society, while eugenicists often disregarded individual rights and ethical concerns. 3. Scientific foundation. Darwin's theory of evolution is a foundational scientific framework, while eugenics has been discredited as unscientific and harmful. Legacy. While Darwin's theory of natural selection revolutionized biology, its misapplication by eugenicists and social Darwinists led to some of the most harmful social policies of the 20th century. Today, eugenics serves as a cautionary tale about the misuse of scientific ideas to justify prejudice, inequality, and human rights abuses.
Thank you for watching. Please share the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Check out other series including 10-minute synopses or complete audiobooks on HennessyHendo on YouTube. Improve your vocabulary. Be more fun at parties. Increase your knowledge. Become a literary master like Hendo.